Hello, Lawrence.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. We are here in the fifth episode of the Pit. It has been a long time after some holidays outside of the city. But, I was asked specifically by a friend from the community to explain what the Pit goes about. So, it's basically a podcast where we hear the stories of the people from our community particularly, but also from other towns nearby, but also people that may want to share the story and how they came back to the faith. Well, maybe came back or just discovered the faith in reference with the situation mentioned in the parable of the prodigal son, in which it's this moment when the son realizes that he needs to go back to his father. So, like the pit, it's not in itself a biblical specific term, but it's this moment when he's willing to eat the carrots that the pigs are eating, and he realizes, like, what am I doing? I need to go back to my father. So this is the basis, and well,
Right.
how are you, Lawrence?
Thank you for having me. I am fantastic, actually. The weather's good. Yeah, I keep myself busy today. Plenty of fun things to do. There's adoration later today. There's mass. So yeah, no, I'm having a great time today.
Lovely, lovely.
Yes.
Are you ready to begin?
Yes. Shoot.
Great. Okay, so the first question is, where do you come from?
Mhm.
And what was your relationship like with faith or God or even religion
Right,
when you
right,
were
right,
growing
right.
up?
Well, I am from Heerlen. Yeah, this is a city close by to Maastricht, where we are right now. I was raised, however, in Belgium, just across the border. Also locally, it's I think a 10-minute drive by car from where we are currently. Yeah, no. And growing up, I wasn't a very religious person. Uh, my family is well, on paper Protestant, but not practicing really. Yeah, no, a few people from my family are somewhat practicing, but the rest isn't. Um, and I did not grow up believing in God. I mean, as a child, I think I did have some sort of belief, but this wasn't accompanied by some prayer life, without gospel reading, without any of that. Also, no church services. Well, I mean, I come from a Protestant family, but we never went to church on Sundays, for example. So I can say I got a lot to see from the Christian faith growing up. I did have classes of Protestantism at school, um, but nevertheless, I think when about puberty hit, I wasn't interested in it anymore. Goes for a lot of people, actually. When you are 13, 14, and the hormones start kicking in, and you are super cool and on the top of the world, God isn't particularly cool anymore. So yeah, that's kind of how my faith disappeared completely, if it was ever there.
Okay.
Yes.
Were there, because I have noticed a bit of a pattern in like the stories I have heard, that sometimes there is this person that was like your reference in terms of religion, like, I don't know, a grandma that always told you, like, oh,
Yeah.
you should go do prayer, or your parents, or I don't know, a teacher. Was there any kind of person in your life?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, this phrase of "Oh my God" was very popular, and all the OMG thing. You saw these on screensavers, and it became like a hype thing. And I would say this very often at some point. I think when I was 10, maybe, or something. And I recall my grandpa always saying that I shouldn't say so, because if I did it too many times without any good reason, then God wouldn't listen anymore. And it's interesting because, of course, it's not appropriate to use God's name for not nonsensical reasons, of course. So in that sense, I could say this was, well, it was an appropriate remark to make from him, to put me back in place. But for the rest of that, no, I can't say there was much religious representation. I mean, my granddad did go to the Protestant church services in the local church, and I would go whenever I was there on Sundays. But for the rest, there wasn't any relevance of religion in my life. And he would pray. He would pray for dinner. That I do remember. Yes.
Okay. And um, You mentioned a bit that it was because it was uncool to think about God, but what would also be some reasons? Because like when you maybe grew up a little bit more, that you thought, okay, maybe the faith is not for me, or I'm not interested in that.
Mm. I can't say I really had any moment like that, particularly where I seriously considered the idea of believing God. No, not at all. It was pure ignorance, really. It was going along with the idea that there would be no such thing as a God, and that's stupidity, and that believing in a supernatural deity is something for children. You know, it's this typical communist materialist it's this Marxist idea of, you know, there's nothing but matter, you know, that infiltrated European society in the last century. And you know, this is kind of an assumption that they have at schools. You know, a lot of teachers have this assumption, people around you have this assumption, so you just tag along with it because that's what the others do. And we are herds, you know. How do you say that in English? Like sheep.
Sheep.
Yeah, no, exactly. You know, so if other people around us do something, we tend to copy it because we feel like that way we belong to the community which we are a part of. Yes.
Okay. And how was it that you, because it strikes me that like your family, like your background was Protestant,
Yes.
and then like nothing, but how did it happen? What happened after, I don't know, this adolescence? What was it like that you ended up thinking, okay, perhaps there's something more?
Right. So I think when I was about 17 years old, also for some context, for some chronology, I am 21 right now. I think when I was about 17, I got interested by this idea of an intellectual life, of making, of taking your time to think about um, what the meaning of life is, where we come from, what the essence of life is. You know, what is our purpose? What should our purpose be? Questions like these started to interest me. So I went on and read a lot of philosophical works, and this led me on a road of seeking knowledge. And somewhere on the line, I started questioning the idea of rejecting religion, well, based on pure reason, really. And so I recall at some point at school, I studied marketing, and when I was in my first year, I think I was like 18/19, there was this girl at my school. She was Catholic, and I was talking about the faith in God that I lacked, really. But I was curious about her faith. And when I told her that as a kid I lost my faith due to ignorance, she said, "Well, what did you do to regain it?" This was something she asked instantly, and this triggered me a lot because there's this presupposition in her question that it's something that I ought to do. She doesn't say, "Oh, that is a shame," or "You hear this very often." No, she says immediately, "What did you do to undo this thing that happened?" Right? So it's kind of like she presupposed it's something that is a necessity to do. Like it's not acceptable to lose one's faith. And this I was thinking to myself, how can it be that someone is so convinced of this that in a rather instinctive way she just drops this question. And I couldn't let go of this amazement I had. And before I knew it, and this is grace setting in, you know, this is God putting his hand in there. I just started feeling guilty. I just started feeling very guilty. I had a sudden urge to read the Bible. I had a certain urge to pray, but I didn't know what to pray to, right? I recall sitting in my bed and thinking to myself, you know, whatever this desire that I have is and means, and whatever I should do with it is not relevant before I know what I'm going to pray to then and why, because I do not believe in God. Thus, as I said, this intellectual curiosity made it very interesting for me then, as I felt this desire to pray and to seek out some kind of deity whose existence I didn't believe in, and to look for the arguments, right? To look for why would I believe, right? To look for proof, to look for evidence. and this went down by first looking at the core arguments of atheism, particularly the new atheism of Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens. And well, I concluded they were philosophically seen very bad, right? They're very strong rhetoric arguments, but the arguments are not actually built on logic. No, 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 no. The atheists take a presupposition, and then they build an argument on this. But what they are claiming to be true, they don't prove, right? So they throw something on the table as if it were already proven to be true or factual, objective, and then on this thing they start building their argument. But the fundament of the argument is missing, obviously, right? So I had to reject that immediately, and then, well, then I started doing some research on different religions and such, and to fast forward this talk of mine, otherwise I can talk for another 40 minutes about this topic specifically. I ended up at Christianity. Yes.
Okay. And do you consider in your particular path, for example, in this this thing you mentioned of how you ended up in Christianity, what would you say was this carobpit that we mentioned in the beginning? Like, okay, I understand you started reading more, but how did you end up jumping from Christianity to more specifically to Catholicism?
Well, I would argue this is more of a spiritual thing than an intellectual one. I really tend to make my conversion story something that is purely intellectual, that has purely to do with arguments, but this wouldn't be the case. I mean, when I considered Christianity to be the answer to my question, I did lean towards Catholicism because of church history. When looking at history, it's an obvious conclusion if you view history with an open mind, that the first form of Christianity to ever exist was Catholicism. This is factual. There is black on white proof of this. But just because you can read something, right? Just because you can see the evidence in front of you doesn't mean you will believe it. So this is obviously credit to God's mercy, right, and God's love. He helped me. We often tend to think faith is something that comes from us, but faith is a gift. Faith is a grace that God grants us. You see it in the gospel plenty of times. The Jews, they see but they do not believe, right? Because they have hearts of stone. They have not opened their hearts for the gospel, and this is only something God can grant you, this grace, to be open to the truth. So yes, from an intellectual perspective, church history after ending up at Christianity was convincing that I had to look to Rome, but to actually believe in this, right, to actually give into this idea of submitting to a faith like that, this was pure grace.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and well, particularly, how did you end up where you are today? Like, how did you end up in Maastricht, in the Maastricht Student Chaplaincy,
Right.
like in everything that you are doing?
Yes. So the same student, this girl from my school, whom I said about earlier that she posed me this question that interested me so much. She told me to go to this church in Maastricht, this parish church, which is being maintained by the Fathers of the Oratory of Saint Philip Neri, which is a congregation in the church, and she advised me to go to this church because the liturgy was beautiful. She said she'd like to come there. I went there, and there I met the chaplain, Father Girollo. And he's been a great guide for me throughout my journey towards God. Yes, he has had a significant influence on my faith. God obviously has used him to take me to where I am right now, and I am incredibly thankful for his guidance. He has been my confessor, he has been my spiritual director, And yeah, no, without his guidance, I wouldn't have been right now where I am right now.
Okay.
Yes.
And did you have to ask like to get baptism or?
Right. No, I was baptized as a kid in the Protestant church, but I was, baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit. So this was a valid baptism, right? Intrinsically a Catholic baptism, right? There's one baptism, but every baptism that's valid is by definition Catholic.
Okay.
But what I had to do is become a member of the church, right? And for baptized Christians that are not Catholic, this means professing the faith, professing the Catholic faith. And after that happened, and I became Catholic, there of course came First Communion, then confirmation. Yes, but no, it wasn't big. It didn't require any big steps, really. Yes.
And well, if it's possible to ask, how did your family take the fact that
yes.
you were converting?
For my mother, this was a very surprising thing that she was kind of icky of because she was raised Protestant, and sadly, this means you, in most cases, that you were also raised with some stigma, negative stigma towards Catholicism, right? With some image that does not comply with reality, but that's very negative. And in that sense, there was some discomfort on her side. My dad didn't really care; he was fine with whatever. But for my grandpa, this was dramatic. It still is, yes. Yeah, so I have good contact with him. That's not the point, but it has become a big source of frustration and disappointment for him.
Okay.
But for the rest of the family, as I said before, they're not really practicing Christians, so they couldn't care less, I think. Yes, it was moreover a surprise on the grand scheme of things.
And well, a bit in this context, considering that a big part of the Dutch society is either Protestant or agnostic or even atheist, what would you think has been your biggest challenge being a Catholic in this society particularly? This is a bit of script, sorry.
No. It's fine. I'd say aside from the whole religious context of this country, well, whether it's more Protestant or more Catholic, I'd argue that the Netherlands is most of all secular, right? It's most of all atheist, and this means that the daily life has also been formed around this belief, or rather this unbelief, this belief that there is no such thing as a higher being, and this has introduced severe paganism into our day-to-day life, into the Dutch culture. And I think this is generally hard to deal with because every day when you walk out of the door, you come into a country that is intrinsically not Christian in practice, right? So whether it's the way people dress or the way people talk or the way people behave or the habits they have, the things they consume, yeah, you really have to keep your guard up, and it's very easy, especially if you're a convert, especially if you have not been grounded in the faith yet. It's hard to not fall back into, let's say, tendencies of old, tendencies that you were tied to before your conversion, for example, or tendencies that have survived your conversion. Later on, after a few years, this becomes easier, yet not always, but especially in the beginning, this really requires you to become a new person, right? Like we read in the scriptures to, put the old person down. I don't know if this is the English translation. To put down or put away, or the old person, to let the old person die, and let the new person live on. You have to immerse yourself in your faith, and that requires neglecting parts of you that there's no room for in the faith.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, no, this is there's no Catholic culture, right? And this is also this is another thing, in countries where there's a very Catholic culture, maybe there's a difference, of course, between the Catholic culture of a country and the Catholicism that the people actually practice, or the extent to which the people living in the country actually practice Catholicism. But it's a less of a big step, from the one to the other. If there is a very Catholic culture present, and at least the people in those countries usually are not that far off from God. Like you said, for example, here you ask someone about Hemelvaart, they have no clue. You know, if you go to Spain, for example, everybody knows, right?
Mhm.
And on these days, at least most people go to church. So you know that is a difference, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it must be shocked because you also you're from South America.
Yeah.
This must come as a total shock coming in a country as secular as this, no?
Yeah, like for example, Mexico in particular, it's very funny because people say like Mexico is not Catholic, but they are Guadalupan. So it's like everybody loves the Virgin of Guadalupe, but not everybody is Catholic. So it's funny because you can find people that have nothing to do with religion,
Yes.
and that even have some very debatable practices. But it's like, oh, it's 12th of December. Today is the day of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and they go to visit Our Lady of Guadalupe. So it's a very different way. For
Yes.
example, when one of the first times I came to the Netherlands, I entered to a flower store.
Yes.
It was a beautiful flower store, not gonna lie. But it had like this very big statue of Our Lady. And I told the lady, like, oh, beautiful statue. Can I ask why did you put her there? I don't know. I was expecting for her to say, oh, because the shop is consecrated to her, something like that.
Yes.
And then she told me, I don't know. I've seen other people have it as decoration, so I just put it in. And I was like, and do you know who she is? No, not really. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, well, let me tell you a story. So for me, it was pretty striking. Because maybe it's not like the people in my country go to mass, all of them. And I remember when I heard for the first time that somebody was not going on mass on Sunday, like it was like, what do you mean? What do you do on the Sunday? Like in my childish mind. But then you come here and it's like, and there's people that don't even know who Mary is,
Yes.
It's pretty impressive coming from a Catholic, not only country, but also region of the world.
Yes, yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah, but well, it gives more importance to like the people that are still practicing, no? Like the other day I was talking with a priest that comes from Mexico, but he has been living here in Maastricht for 8 years, Father Andy. I don't know if you know him. He was telling me like that when I think Saint John Paul II came to the Netherlands, he was like, I was just in France, and it is a very disorganized church, but it has a lot of faith. And then he said like, but the Netherlands is very organized, but has no faith. And for me, it was very, very hard to hear that, because I think we are very well taken care of, specifically in the parish we go, because you see a lot of young people, you see a lot of families, but then it's not the common denominator, no, not only in this city, because I've been told that this is one of the most Catholic cities in the Netherlands, but also in our parish. So many churches are closed here in Maastricht. It's I don't know, it was a bit sad. So continuing, picking up on that.
Yes.
So it's like a bit of depressing, but at the same time I see the people that have converted, that have changed, like I don't know, Dion that was already interviewed, you, Joshua, so many people in the community that I think like, okay, if they came back to the faith, then there is still hope, and there is still like some way, and to think that in the end it doesn't depend on us. No, what you said, like faith is a grace; it doesn't come from us.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. And there's this obvious thing happening here, especially in the south, but not only in the south, of young people converting, which is of course a very beautiful thing. You also see it in France more than here, way more than here. But it is also, I think, a danger to be too optimistic, right? Because the fact remains that the church in the Netherlands is a church that's on the intensive care currently, right? It's not healthy. And yes, especially in cities like Maastricht, but also in Rotterdam and in Amsterdam. There is a church or a parish here and there where it's packed with young people, but there's also the rest of the country, right? There's 17 plus million people in this country. And a lot of the old people, still attending church, for example, I mean, they won't be with us physically forever, right? So I think it's a beautiful thing to see so many young people in church, but I also think we shouldn't put our guard down. We need to. This is really a time of crisis in which we need to put in a lot of efforts, whether religious, whether layperson, whether priest, to evangelize, right? To not be afraid to speak out about the faith, right? I mean, the 12 apostles as well, they went out and they preached. They preached to a pagan society. They had never heard of this. I mean, they were people who believed in deities, right? This was not an atheist society. But still, we have so many means, for example, the internet and everything what it contains, to use in our favor. There's really no excuse. But we tend today to be ashamed of our faith, right? Being amongst atheists, and this is something we need to discard, right? We need to be brave, and we need to be thankful, right? And we need to go out there and preach the word, full of joy, full of love for everyone. And I think the young people who, especially the converts, right? They are very, how do you say that? That is word for
enthusiastic.
No, enthusiastic. Very. In Dutch we say ijver.
Like
fervor, maybe.
Fervor?
No, you wanted to say?
Like gullible?
Oh no, that's not what I meant.
No.
No, but they are full of, let's just say, fire for Christ,
okay,
right?
okay.
Right? They're burning with like you said, enthusiasm for the faith and for talking about the faith. So that is a beautiful thing to see. The young people, they are not afraid to speak their mind in regards to their faith. Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine you see, I don't know, a child that is in the exact same situation as you were when you were 17. What would you tell him or her if they just had this tiny question of, perhaps there is a God?
Dare to think outside of yourself, right? Have the courage to step outside of yourself, and to be open to things you had not yet imagined to be true or possibly true. Because what I've noticed when talking to a lot of young people, they have no clue why they're atheists, a lot of them, or why they claim to be atheists, and their idea of God, or rather their lack of an idea of a God, or the fact that they're not religious, a lot of times has to do as well with the fact that they simply do not know where to look and what to do, and they're kind of uncomfortable with it and insecure about it, right? And so what I would say is be courageous and dare to step out of that comfort zone and just be open to be amazed, right? Because it's like G.K. Chesterton has this way of writing about the faith as too good to be true, right? Something you only see in a fairy tale. Like, it's so good that one could barely imagine it to be true. And this is the beauty of faith, right? Because it is too good to be true, yet it is very much true, right? And if you have an option between a world in which this is true, a reality which is true, a reality in which this isn't, right? It would be a stupidity to choose the latter than instead of the former. So yes, just be courageous, right? And allow yourself to be amazed. Allow yourself to be swooned by the beauty of the faith, by the beauty of Christ.
Then, now the last question.
Yes.
What is one resource, like in terms of a particular prayer, a book, a music group, a particular versicle from the Bible that you would recommend to somebody that is in this process of conversion?
Still in the process of conversion?
Or well, that it's...
No, as in, is this something like that that's just new to the faith?
That it's new to the faith.
and he has received the sacraments or not, or
Imagine it's only like, okay, I am considering Catholicism somehow.
yes, right. Okay, that's important. I would advise Mass. That's the first. I would advise to go to Mass every Sunday, right? I would say daily, but when you're just converting, no. Go to Mass, seek it out. Look for peers, look for young people, right? Look for people you can relate to. Because going back to something you asked earlier, how I ended up at the chaplaincy, I only started talking about my spiritual director, but the chaplaincy, as I was converting / as I had just converted, was of major influence because when you're outside of the whole religious faith, I was not a religious person at all, right? And the whole idea of priests in cassocks and mass, this was all this was all the way there, but I was still here, right? And what really helped me is the students, right, who have friends who also either are new converts or have been Catholic their whole lives, but that were of the same age, right? Because you can relate to these people. It's not just like the idea that some people have of Catholicism or a Catholic Church, that it's packed with grannies, that's packed with old people. So to have people your age that are also active in this journey towards God, this is of dire importance, I'd say. Yes. Because it keeps you involved in a very low, how do you say that, low,
like,
it's not too much, it's very low profile, okay. Right? A very low profile, accessible manner that doesn't require much of you, okay. Aside from having fun with other people your age, Okay. Yes.
Okay, I love that you mentioned going to Mass, because I think it's one of the most important things, and maybe it's one of the most important things that you don't do. And then it's like, what do you mean now I gotta do it?
Yes, exactly. Right, because there's the truth, just like faith is a gift, it's also, in Mass, we encounter Christ, we encounter God in a very literal, in a very physical manner, right? So if you have not received the sacraments, if you don't receive communion yet, if you don't go to confession yet, still just simply attending is enough for these graces of the Mass, of the sacrifice, to be bestowed on you, right? So this keeps your soul alive, so to say, right? You need to go to Mass, even if you don't understand it, even if you don't. Just like me, for example, I would always sit in the at the end of church near the entrance, so I could look what all the people in front of me were doing, because I didn't know about sitting or standing up or kneeling. That's not relevant, right? What is important is being there, not only for yourself but also for God, right? Because his hands are always stretched out towards us, but we have been given free will, so it's our duty to also take a step, maybe a trembling one, maybe an insecure one, maybe a doubtful one, but to take a step towards him, right? Because if he's standing there with his open arms, full of excitement and love for us, hoping for us to come towards him, but we are afraid, or we are negligent, or things are not going to go down, right? It requires a choice, right? And the choice is ours, so we should just make it, especially if that choice is just going to Mass for 1 hour on a Sunday. I mean, come on.
You're not gonna die.
No, definitely not.
Okay. Yes. Well, Lawrence, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
It's nice to have more, more understanding. Like, I knew like that you were a convert, but I didn't know the specifics. So it's pretty nice. Thank you for opening up. Thank you for sharing it. And we'll see you around here in Maastricht.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And have a blessed week.
God bless you.